was the beginning of the end for them if they recognized it.
In the immediate days and weeks after Pearl Harbor, of course, America felt violated. I mean, we were angry. We were obviously very saddened by the loss of life. As the news of how much damage the Japanese had managed to inflict, which was initially confidential and then gradually seeped out into the public consciousness, as that became known, the sense of anger and desire for revenge became quite strong. And even though the overall strategic plan of the Allies was to concentrate on Germany first, the fact that Japan had committed this unannounced Sunday morning raid that had so badly devastated the American Pacific Fleet led to a desire for revenge as soon as possible.
At that time, this was going to be our first mission over there, so it wasn't just another one. This was a big one.
We thought it was just another bombing mission. We didn't think it'd be so important at this day and age. We weren't even supposed to discuss it among ourselves, what was going on.
When Jimmy Doolittle first set this up, he could not tell the pilots what the mission was. He told them that they had been invited here to volunteer, if they desired, for a special mission. He couldn't tell them what it was, except that it was dangerous.
They asked for volunteers. They wanted 16 airplanes with crews. I said, well, I get to go with my airplane, and that'll be my job. That's okay, I'll do that. So I volunteered.
We were the only group that had the proper type of airplane. We were flying B-25s.
Now, the training consisted of instruction from a Navy lieutenant about how to take off in less than 250 feet of runway, how to get into the air with only about 75 knots of airspeed. Now, this violated everything they'd been taught in flight school.
And we had to practice getting off of the ground in 500 feet.
Everybody thought that that was going to be the most challenging thing. But it turned out to be the easiest.
Once they saw that they were lifting off from painted carrier decks on the runway, a few of them began to intuit exactly what was going on.
When I found out that we were going on a carrier was when they had us taxi down to the pier where the aircraft carrier was sitting. And they lifted our airplane up on the carrier, and that's when I knew we was going on a carrier.
Well, when we first got aboard, I think the Navy personnel were kind of disgusted because they were going to just transport us probably to the South Pacific.
The idea of putting an Army air group on board a carrier was brand new, and it caused some hackles to rise. Once those pilots got on board the Hornet, there was a bit of tension between the two. First of all, the Army pilots tended to keep to themselves, and some of the Navy people resented that a bit. A few of them thought that the Army folks were a little slapdash. They didn't wear neckties on board. They wore open collar shirts, short sleeve instead of the regulation Navy long sleeves. They would call a meeting for 8:30, and the Army pilots would wander in around 9 o'clock. And some of these things created a bit of tension between the two services. But what made it evaporate almost immediately was when the Hornet finally got to sea, went out under the Golden Gate Bridge and into the Pacific, and Mitcher was able to get on the 1MC and announce that the goal of the mission was to bomb Tokyo. Once the Navy people knew that, then all of a sudden the Army pilots were their best friends.
Our plan was to hit Tokyo, fly south through the China Sea, and then west into the China Sea.
We were to set Tokyo on fire.
We weren't sure we could bomb them back.
See, they thought they knew every airplane we had that operated off a carrier, and that we would have to get within 200 miles of Tokyo to be able to make it back to the carrier. And they didn't know that we had bombers and we were not going back to the carrier.
A lot of them assumed it was probably be a one-way flight. They never hesitated.
You had a job to do, and you just did it and got in the plane and shut up unless you were supposed to talk. That's what it amounted to.
The raid really begins, in a way, in the pre-dawn darkness of April 18th, about 3 o'clock in the morning, when American radar identified a surface contact. And in these waters, so close to Japan, only 500, 550 miles out, it could only be a hostile contact. So it was clear that there was an enemy somewhere in the vicinity.
We heard the guns going off.
Doolittle and Mitcher turned to one another and said, "They know we're here."
Just came out over the loudspeaker, Army pilots, man your plane, so we had to hurry up, get ready, and get aboard the airplane.
The way it happened, of course, we had to take off 300 or 400 miles further from Japan than we. So that meant we didn't have enough gas to reach our destination. So all of a sudden, it became a kind of a moment of truth there that, you know, I don't know, we'll go drop our bombs and see what happens. That was about it.
When I got in the airplane, the wind was blowing across the deck so hard it couldn't hardly stand up. So we had plenty of lift to get off. And after I was up in the airplane, they handed me 12 5-gallon cans of gasoline for extra. That gave us another 60 gallons. Doolittle took off first, and he got off all right, and all the other all six of them got off ahead of us, so we didn't think we'd have any trouble.
One of the planes forgot to put their flaps down. They went off the bow of the ship and went down and almost went in the water, but they were able to catch it in time. And when the bow of the carrier went back down, there it was, just over the water.
We watched 15 airplanes take off, so we felt pretty sure we could make it.
Once those B-25s got into the air, the American forces just moved away from each other as fast as they possibly could.
We just headed for Japan. We didn't have any navigation equipment except a small magnetic compass.
Well, by the time we got to Japan, the sun was shining bright. Saturday, right at noon, it was a beautiful day, and a lot of people on the beach. And we come over, and they were waving to us. And we were flying so low that I could see the expressions on their faces. They were cheering. I'm sure they thought we were Japanese airplanes.
I thought I would not survive the mission when we found out what we were going to do, taking off early and not having enough gas, and bombing during the daylight and everything. No escort. We had a turret, but no gunner. And I thought I wouldn't survive the mission.
The 16 B-25 bombers that flew over Japan each carried 4 500-pound bombs.
We had to climb then to 1,500 feet to drop our bombs so they wouldn't blow us out of the air when they exploded.
The physical damage was minimal. The Japanese blew up those occasions when bombs went astray and actually landed in non-combatant areas, schools and hospitals. They, of course, got their propaganda machine going and said, oh, these ruthless Americans were killing women and children and so on. They punned on Jimmy Doolittle's name by saying that the raid had done little to affect the Japanese. And in effect, that was true. But the psychic damage is hard to measure, and that was real and palpable.
And I think it really surprised them. They never suspected us in a B-25 taking off of a carrier Hornet and bombing them, you know.
People were very happy about it, to hear that we were able to go over there, take off from carriers and bomb the home island of the Japanese. Nothing like that had ever been done before. And it shook the Japanese tremendously. They were very, very unhappy about the whole thing.
Morale of the whole nation just really went up. And that was one of the big things we accomplished, because that made such an impression on the Americans that they just worked that much harder.